And I do so by reading a statement that I have learned over my years of leading meetings, and I would love for each of us to just take a moment as I read through this. We will take the time today to acknowledge the land that we are meeting on through Zoom is the traditional homelands of the Chickasaw, Cherokee, Shawnee, and Yuchi people. This land has been a center for the indigenous people to gather, trade, and maintain kinship ties. And this land was violently taken under settler colonialism through genocide and open warfare. And the region that is now Tennessee still struggles for sovereignty, self-determination, and justice. The genocidal acts of settler colonialism extended to the peoples of Africa and their enslaved descendants. The vestiges of slavery remain throughout the United States and directly affect the descendants of enslaved peoples, descendants who helped define the rich culture of Africa and other enslaved nations. The genocidal patterns of violence against peoples of African descent and indigenous people have been replicated to exclude and harm from many intersecting marginalized identities: religious, minoritized, disabled, and LGBTQ+ identified peoples, BIPOC, and POC writ large here in the United States. Today, we acknowledge that we are living, breathing, laughing, loving, grieving, learning, and sharing space on unceded territory. May we learn to honor the historical and contemporary presence and power of the people and their belief that we must be caretakers of the lands and waters for the livelihood of future generations. Thank you for indulging me on that. So today we're going to be talking about equity in business through an LGBTQ lens. And I think it's important to say that all people everywhere deserve to work and work in organizations where they trust their leaders, where they take pride in what they do and enjoy those who they work with. Organizations must realize that high trust and equitable work environments where everyone's potential is realized and celebrated is not only good for business, but it is also good for society. When businesses and nonprofits continue to work together to build equitable environments, there is a possibility for a bright future for all. Each of us who breaks down a barrier or cracks a glass ceiling must remember that there is always someone behind us who needs a helping hand. And so we will be talking about that today in a deep conversation. I'm going to take a quick moment now to introduce my panelists for the conversation today. And I will start with Marie. And Marie, if you could unmute, share your pronouns and tell us how you spend your days.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marie Sewing. I am the Chief Diversity Officer. That was actually a recent promotion for the Nashville Convention and Visitors Corporation. I identify as she and her. I've been with the CVC here 15 and a half years. I have been in hospitality for going on 32 years. I'm telling my age here. But how I spend my days, because we want Nashville to be a warm and welcoming destination for all. And we're talking about the LGBTQ+ community. We're talking about all ethnicities. I mean, Nashville has a rich cultural history here. And so we want to make sure that our visitors and our locals alike know about it. And so that's what I do. We have a full service convention and visitors team here. So that what that means is we have a sales team that markets the city as a destination to the world. We have convention services, we have marketing, we have PR, we have accounting, all of those. So if you briefly consider diversity in the middle of that, we want to make sure that the diversity and equity inclusion is a tentacle that reaches to each and every department and therefore to our visitors and locals. If that, put that in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. Dawn.
Hello, everyone. Dawn Cornelius. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I founded my first company when I was 12 years old. It was fun to kind of reflect and kind of think back over that. Had a similar to Marie, instead of saying 30 something, which it has been, but let's just use 20. The last 20 years plus, I've worked across many different industries with small, mid-sized, large cap businesses, primarily in senior leadership roles and leading business strategy, marketing, branding, social enterprise strategy, and some nonprofit management along the way. But currently I'm the founder, CEO of Human, which is a tech company with a mission to change the future of how people find their person. We're launching our first product this year, which is a relationship app that's driven by advanced AI to create a more honest dating experience and to help people find their forever person. I'm also the founder, principal consultant of the Cornelius Group, part strategy, part marketing agency that aligns and amplifies growth stage companies. And we actually focus on companies who have change making in their DNA and outcomes. So that aligns with my personal passion and allows me to be involved in work with companies who really care about making sustainable change, whether that's a core part of their product offerings, but more so in their DNA. Pronouns, she and her.
Thank you, Dawn. LaTanya.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm LaTanya Channel. I am your state director for a federal government agency called SBA, or the Small Business Administration. I'm the state director for the state of Tennessee. And since we're talking about time, I've been with SBA, I can't believe it, it's been 20 years, initially in Washington, D.C., and for the past 7.5 years here in Nashville, covering the state of Tennessee. But I've been in federal government for 30 years. Yes, let me breathe when I say that. 30 years. And I previously worked at the Department of Agriculture, working on civil rights and EEO matters at a national level. And before I came to Tennessee, I was working at SBA headquarters, working on disadvantaged business policy and regulations on a national level. So working here in Tennessee, I love, because now I get to see and meet the people who those policies and regulations impact. So what I do on a day-to-day basis is try to make it real what SBA does. There's a lot of rules, there's a lot of regulations, there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of red tape. So me and my team try to make it tangible and real. And we also try to be honest when we can't help break through the red tape, but we can at least tell you what it is and how it can benefit your business. So, and I go by she and her.
Thank you, LaTanya. Olivia.
Hey, my name's Olivia Hill. I'm a Nashville native. I hear there's like 8 or 9 of us and they have a picnic on Saturday. For some reason, I haven't been invited yet. I'm recently retired from 36 years in the power industry. My last position held, I ran Vanderbilt University power plant. I kind of consider myself an accidental activist. After the things that I've been through, I'm a new trans woman. I'm about 3 weeks away from being 3 years old since all my surgeries. And my pronouns are she, her. And the thing that I think touches me the most about my journey and equity, diversity, inclusion was the loss of my male privilege that I absolutely had no idea that I had. And so many people say they don't have any. And I was under the impression that because I showed up to work an hour before everybody else did, and I stayed 4 or 5 hours after everybody else left, and I held every position at Vanderbilt Power Plant, that was because of my efforts and my hard work. And I found out that was because I was male. And had I been female when I applied for the job, not only had I probably not been hired, I would have never been given those opportunities. And so I spend a lot of my days now trying to help people understand about privilege and how people that don't understand they have it do have.
Thank you, Olivia. Terry.
Hello, everyone. My name is Terry Vo, she, her, hers. I am part of the Comcast team. I've been with them for over 5 years. It's crazy to believe that. And I have also the honor to serve as the president of the Nashville LGBT Chamber, which is a over 20-year-old organization that advocates and educates and connects, on behalf of the common interests of LGBT members, businesses, and allies. So I'm really honored. And I think, in my role, I really focus on allyship and action and what that looks like in our community, because it takes all of us to make change. So very excited to be here.
Thank you, Terry. Matt?
Hi, I'm Matthew Charette, and I own some bars and restaurants over in East Nashville, Beyond the Edge, Boston Commons, and Drifters. I've had those places for about 18 years, a little disrupted in the past couple of years with the tornado and the pandemic, but we are almost fully back operational. I guess I'm an ally. And I'm also the stepfather of a trans child. And when he was 10 years old, he took that approach of maybe I'm lesbian, and then maybe I'm non-binary. And then finally, with a lot of support from his mom and I and the community around us, including a lot of my employees who are gay, lesbian, and non-binary, just were able to provide him with enough support where he could come out and be who he is. And he's making those transitions. And, those are, I think because of that, I have a different understanding as an employer, realizing that maybe I hadn't done enough for my community. And so I'm a really big advocate for those who maybe don't always get the invitation to sit at the table, or maybe when they're sitting at their table, aren't treated as an equal. So those are things that are very important to me. And I'm just honored that, Phil, you asked me to be here today. And my pronouns are he, him.
Thank you, Matt. I also want to just also add that Matt has been an instrumental partner for me in my business and my growth as an entrepreneur, as was a co-professor with Dr. Michael Burcham with the Entrepreneur Organization and Catalyst, which I participated in 2021. It's been a long 2 years, y'all. Okay, so I want to get into a bit of a conversation, and I think it's important to note that despite all the amazing progress that has been happening as it relates to homophobia, transphobia, and LGBT equity and equality in the workplace, there is still many who are underrepresented, and there's a lot of continued growth that needs to happen in the DEI space. I prefer to call it the DEI and B space, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, because I think that every business, every organization needs to find that opportunity to create belonging within the spaces that they operate. And Matt, you made just an immediate great example of that belief in your introduction. So I kind of want to open up to the panel, and let's have a little bit of a discussion around where do you see DEIB currently, and where are some of the sort of initial places where some of our businesses can make a positive impact here in our community and throughout the nation. And I'm not going to call on people, but maybe I will. Since you have it in your title, Marie, do you want to start?
Sure. So as I explained earlier, the whole purpose of our existence is to sell Nashville as a destination. And when we want to attract diverse cultures and diverse communities to our city, it is important for us to support those communities within our city. And so we, and Terry would know this, as far as the Pride Festival, we support events and things like that happen in the city. We want to promote that. We make sure that we have that information on our website. I do feel like there are things that we can grow from and learn from and continue to do. within our community as far as reaching out. We have been very great partners with the LGBT Chamber. They have been amazing to work with. When we have had, and when I say we, I'm talking about the state of Tennessee has had what is considered discriminatory legislation being introduced. When we talk to the LGBT Chamber, they are always on board and helping with combating that, because, you know, it's the right thing to do, first of all, but also it costs us money. I mean, we run the risk of losing conventions to our town, which we know support a lot of people and their livelihoods here, not just in Nashville, but in the state of Tennessee. So it behooves us to support all communities that are represented here. And that's definitely what we try to do.
Thank you, Mary. Terry, given your work with the Chamber, and Olivia, feel free to chime in as well, because you're also on the board of the LGBT Chamber. Let's talk a little bit about what the Chamber is doing in relation to combating some of this discriminatory bills, and how the Chamber is playing a role in DEIB work throughout Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think one of our signature programs that we have had is our Corporate Connect. We've had it for over 6 years, and it used to be called Pride in Business. So depending on how long you've been involved with the Chamber. And one thing I really love about this program is that, you know, it's a bi-monthly meeting that anyone is invited. Of course, we'd love for you to be a member, but it's for the opportunity to, you know, have any business that's involved with DE&I, or have LGBT affinity groups, or employee resource groups, or business resource groups. There's names for everything. And so it's a really great opportunity to kind of information share. I think that's one of the greatest things, right? Because your organization may be doing one thing, and then another organization did not think about that. And then, you know, we're always learning from each other, just like we talked about at the beginning of this panel. And so a few, you know, topics that we've discussed, of course, Marie's already discussed it, but, you know, Nashville Pride Festival, that's something we all want to be a part of. The HRC Equality Index, those scores just came out. We just announced, you know, several of our members have scored 100, and just like, you know, Joe had mentioned in his in the press release, you know, Tractor Supply had a 70, and they scored 100 this year. And for us, that's what we're looking for, right? We are wanting that our members who need help or interested in wanting to, you know, reach that 100, how do we get there together? And how do we help one another? And then, of course, like you said, you know, discriminatory legislation, you know, that we are in session. And so it's really important that we know what's going on, and that businesses come together to say that we are not okay with that. So I think, you know, those are just a few of the things that we're doing, and, you know, we need all of you all. So Matt, we hope to see you at the next, you know, the next one. We want you included, and Dawn. And it's just so important that all of us are here. So that's a few things the Chamber is doing. And Olivia, you let me know if I've left anything out.
I was just going to say, talking about the Brewing Up Business also takes a lot of people that we do once a month, and connects not necessarily like-minded people, but they find out after conversation of being time together that they have a lot of like-minded things. And so I think it connects a lot of people that wouldn't necessarily connect in a lot of ways. And my biggest thing with equity, diversity, inclusion, I think, is education. I think we've got to find a way to truly connect with people, because so many people out there think that doesn't really pertain to me. And we've got to find a way to make it real, because most of the people that are paying attention in equity, diversity, inclusion classes, courses, or anything else, usually the people that don't need it, and the people that are there that need it are not really paying attention because they don't think that that really pertains to them. And we've got to find a way to connect with everybody.
That is so true. And may I jump back in there to piggyback on what Terry was saying? There's also an initiative called Tennessee Thrives, which has been around a few years now. But what it is simply are businesses that sign on, they pledge to a more diverse and equitable Tennessee. And this is a statewide initiative. And so if there are any business owners on here, I'm happy to talk with you about it, or send you the link for Tennessee Thrives. I believe there's probably about 400 or so businesses that have signed the pledge as of right now, but we hope that that continues to grow.
Bill, I'd love to pop in and just kind of continue the conversation on something Olivia said that was really, really strong. But what it says to me is that diversity is not an antidote to privilege. As Olivia mentioned, that a lot of times the people who show up for DEI are people who are DE and wanting I, and so therein kind of lies some of the tension, the issue. So I think one of the other sides of the coin of DEI, and especially the B portion of that, is wrestling with what privilege is. As you know, we all kind of think about our identities, and it's not necessary that because you identify as women or same gender loving, but that those automatically exempt you from privilege, because there are other things sometimes that we don't think about, like having been born in America is an enormous amount of privilege. Those who identify as Christian, or if you are younger, or if you're married, and these many different layers and intersections of our identity that sometimes can either increase your opportunity to belong or decrease that. And so some of it, I think, is understanding that difference and diversity, it's not something that we just tolerate, but it has to be seen as something that's necessary. It's like an input. It's an additional input that you have to have if you want to ignite creativity, innovation, things that really spur business and opportunity, and not just seeing it as, is there a bottom line, return on if we embrace DEI? But the belonging piece that you mentioned, Phil, I think is an incredibly important point.
Thank you, Dawn. Really appreciate that. So if we're talking about DEI and the growth or more acceptance of it, what are some things that we're seeing in our businesses today, and in some of the trends that you're seeing that need to be codified in writing, right? What are some of the newest pieces that are being pushed, where we need to create more systematic kind of change that allows for greater conversation around essentially creating that sense of belonging? I mean, when DEI first became a thing, it was just, diversity, and then it was diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now, just as Terry mentioned here in the chat, it's now DEI and B. And some companies are adapting to that. So what are some of those like key points that some of our businesses and nonprofit organizations can put in writing? And I'll let anyone chime in here. And hopefully that wasn't too tough of a question for my esteemed panel.
Hey, Phil, can I chime in from a different perspective, but also answering the question?
Absolutely, yes.
As I mentioned, I'm with the federal government, right? And I'm here to help you. So most of what we do is the result of legislation from the US Congress, right? So many times my hands are tied into what I can and cannot do in getting the services that SBA provides to businesses. But as we know, the administrations change, right? So depending on who the president is, that particular president and their political appointees can be a little bit creative in implementing and reaching the public without having to go through legislation. So, and a lot of people, let me back up, without having to go through legislation. So policy, executive orders, changes in regulations. And the very first thing I said was policy. I think creative political appointees at the federal level and even at the local level can find ways to figure out, well, how can I implement this program being consistent with what the codification of the law says, which is why I wanted to jump in here, and still it be okay. So for instance, some of the political appointees in the current Biden administration who work at SBA decided that with the restaurant fund, program that had come out last year. Remember, we had PPP first, and then we had EIDL, and then we had shutter venues. But we also had a grant program for restaurants. Well, they decided, hey, it wasn't in the law, but why don't we prioritize applicants from what's we call socially and economically disadvantaged businesses. So the definition of social disadvantage is in the law. It's in federal law called the Small Business Act. And so they deemed to prioritize applicants for the restaurant fund from business owners that are socially disadvantaged, what we typically call minority. But believe it or not, the definition is a little broader than that. So I started getting questions from some business owners locally that said, wait a minute, does that include me? I'm an LGBT business owner, and does that include me? And I said, you know what? I used to write some regulations and policy at headquarters. Let me make a call. So I was able to make a call in Washington, and they said, absolutely, why not? If that definition in the federal statute allows us to do that, absolutely. So there was a policy decision that was made to allow prioritization of applications, not just from socially disadvantaged, which we typically call minority, but LGBT applicants as well. On the flip side of that, there was a lawsuit that we couldn't control that stopped SBA's ability to prioritize socially disadvantaged applicants. But the bottom line is, I think as the public understands how the federal government can be tied, the public can also put some pressure on the federal government to work within its own constraints to broaden what we do to reach more people. So let me just stop right there.
Well, Tanya, I think you bring up a really interesting point that we will touch on probably throughout our conversation, which is the importance of the Equality Act, which is something that desperately needs to pass and be enacted into law. The Equality Act is a bipartisan in some ways. It will update federal law to include and express non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ Americans across employment, housing, education, public spaces. And all of that is really important, and all things that will be codified into law, including some Supreme Court rulings that list sexual orientation and gender identity as prohibited grounds of employment discrimination. That's just one topic. Other federal laws will bar sex discrimination and Fair Housing Act and other things. So I think it's important that that is one thing that businesses can be in support of as well. And I know that the Chamber has done some work around that and continues to push that message both locally, but then also from the national organization of LGBT chambers has also done that, the NGLCC. Thank you for that. So let's shift a little bit and talk about pronouns. So I asked everyone at the beginning to introduce yourself with your pronouns. I had a really wonderful conversation yesterday with an organization here in town about the use of pronouns and how they need to be able to move forward into the space of using pronouns in an email signature, on a website. And I think that those are really important things to kind of set the place. Let's talk about pronouns a little bit. I want Dawn, Terry, Matt, probably can all chime in some perspective. That was a flower, Terry? That we can talk a little bit about pronouns. Olivia, I think you also probably have some really robust experience around that as part of your gender confirmation process at Vanderbilt. So let's open the conversation around pronouns then, and the use of gender neutral language and pronouns within the workplace.
Yeah, thank you so much, Phil. I'll just kind of start the conversation. Working in a huge corporation, and even my teams, there's so many different individuals. And I think the biggest part is that, using gender neutral language really makes everyone feel welcome, no matter their identity. And I think that whenever I would say I've even seen a shift at my work. Recently, in the past few years, we even had inclusive language training that was for everyone. So it wasn't for you to sign up, right, in your trainings that you have to do every year. So you can say you passed, but this was really from the top down. We had a senior leader who actually hosted these, and there are several sessions, and everyone had to be a part of it. And one thing I think that's really neat is sometimes, like whenever we as an organization, a department, a company starts using gender neutral language, there's a more natural acceptance that occurs, right? Because I think it's really important that you realize that no one should assume anything about someone without asking first. And when you use that gender neutral language, that really allows for that to happen. And then you start to notice, right, little gaps in the workplace. You can start addressing them. And for example, right, like I will even say in my own office, it's like you have male and female restrooms available. And when, inclusion becomes a priority for everyone, like we can change those to make, changes so everyone at the company benefits. But those are just, I just want to start that out, and things that we've done that I think for me are positive changes.
So Phil, if I could jump in here. I think as an employer, it's really important that your team knows that you support their right to identify however they want to identify. And one of the biggest lessons that I learned is because with my son, he was a girl transitioned to a boy, and it's very easy for me to use the wrong pronouns even now, even though we've been doing it for 6 or 7 years. Well, one of our children was, 3, 4 years old. And every time we would refer to him with the wrong pronoun, she would correct us as if though, what is wrong with you people? And I think for me, the conversation that I try to have with my staff is, I want to know what pronouns people identify with. So I'll just ask. If I'm not sure, I'm just say, what pronouns do you use? And then I say to them, I'm going to get this wrong a lot, but I need you to correct me. And I think that's important. And I think it's important that people know, and, and when I make a mistake, I say, listen, I'm not trying to frustrate you. Just please be patient with me, and I think the other cool thing that I just want to add, I didn't really think about it, but it was really important to me when the tornado shut my businesses down. I had to do some rebuilding. And one of the things that I did is I created gender neutral bathrooms. I had the opportunity to create gender neutral bathrooms, which was just, I didn't realize how big of a thing that was to people until I saw my son struggling with it when he was not confident yet about, here he is identifying as a boy, but he's not comfortable going into the boys' room. So I think anything that we can do as an employer that creates that safe space is essential, but I think it also requires some kind of conversation with everyone and being open to that conversation.
The primary message that I left with this organization yesterday was that at the end of the day, it's about respect, right? It is purely about treating each other with respect and dignity. If I want to know who you are, I am letting you into my life, right? And when I do that, if you cannot respect me for my whole person, then we probably shouldn't be in community with one another, right? And it's the first step in building relationship. It's the first step in building community. And I think that's so critically important, whether it's a family relationship or if it's business or if it's just someone you're serving in your business, right? All really important things to note.
I'd say, Phil, too, as an employer, one of the best parts about my son's transition is the conversations I had with my employees. And it was almost an invitation for them to educate me, because it's easy for us to go along with the habits and the processes that we've always used for years and years and years, not knowing that we're actually treating our staff and our employees and our customers in a way that's not consistent with how we really feel and believe, just because we've set things up in a certain way. And that's the way they've operated for years.
I could just jump in there. I think the two biggest things about pronouns are one, most trans people's biggest goal in life is to try to just fit in. and be normal. Of all the letters of the LGBTQIA, we're the only ones that put our identity out in front, and we don't get to hide and put a mask on. And so when you use your pronouns, it sets the tone that you're accepting that person. Whether they identify as anything in front of you or not, by you using your pronouns, it lets them know that you're okay. And when you use their correct pronouns, it just is like Phil said, it's respect. It's a way of saying, I accept you for who you are. Regardless of how I think you look, regardless of how I think you are, I accept you for what you say, and I respect you as a human. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
Love this conversation. And can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Good. Yep.
I certainly don't claim to know everything. And I can say that this has been, this journey for me has been a learning one. I too have a dear family member who's going through the change as well, from a boy to a girl, or a man to a woman, I should say. And so for her mother, and so we're going through that too, right? It's been frustrating for her because her mother is learning to use the correct pronouns and such. So it's been really, really eye-opening for us. And it's been wonderful for her because parents accept her, of course, but they're having to learn what's appropriate, what she would like to be identified as, and making sure that they are careful, because she went from he to they, and then from they to she. And so I bought a book called The Savvy Ally. And Terry, I emailed Joe Woolley about that, because I was like, I need to educate myself on so many things. I know a lot, but I don't know what I don't know. And so he said, yeah, that's a great one. So I'm reading this book, Her Mother, so that we can share and learn together and grow together. And so it's been a great journey.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that you've called out the book. We'll make sure that we include that as one of the resources, Marie. Very helpful. It's actually a really wonderful book. The one thing that really spoke to me out of this part of the conversation was Matt, and you talked about what you said initially was I will get this wrong, but forgive me, or give me space to get it wrong. And I think that's all it needs to be. This is not about, it never is about you, right? If you get someone's pronoun wrong, I'm sorry, I'll do better, or I'm learning. It's a very simple step in the right direction to ensure that there's that level of respect and appreciation. So we're going to shift a little bit and talk about.
Can I just jump in here real quick, Phil, and just say, to kind of say with Matt too, that in the trans community, we get our own pronouns wrong occasionally. We all make mistakes. We're all human. And there are occasions that I'll say, like, come on, give a guy a break. I mean, and so we get it wrong too. The fact that you're trying is worth everything.
Validating. Thank you. Let's shift over to inclusive benefits. And I think from a benefit perspective, it's a really interesting conversation because it can have impact from a small business owner perspective in terms of ensuring that benefits are inclusive, but also from a large corporation benefit and how that benefit program, Terry and Olivia, you both have had those experiences just from ensuring that there's an inclusive benefit. So let's talk about that, and how does creating an inclusive benefit structure within a corporation or within a small business also create that sense of belonging?
Yeah, thanks so much, Phil. Honestly, I am so proud at Comcast, because whenever we were going and discussing all these things, I started doing some research, right? So everyone always wants to tout about their benefits and perks with medical and dental. And one thing that I feel like many companies are not quite there yet is about transgender care. So we actually have that. You have a full suite, and I'm really proud that we partner with the University of California, San Francisco's transgender care program. And so this resource is available to all Comcast employees and their dependents who are enrolled in our like medical plan, right? So with that, you can go in and someone will call you, or you can have a, private one-on-one meeting, and it really helps you to realize, all these services and go through it with you, so you're not alone. And I really like it because it's about information, it's about education, there's a care navigation, and it's not just employees, right, but their dependents. And I think that's really critical when you're looking at, your medical and dental, the benefits you offer. Look at the language. Are you ensuring that everyone is included? Or or is it what I would say, the normatives in society with he, she, right? Are we making sure that everyone is included? So that's something we've been working on. And of course, we just keep trying to improve our benefits so they are as inclusive as possible. And that's one step in the direction, because I think oftentimes you don't think about it until it affects you, right? And I think one thing, being, talking about equity, is that we've got to think about things that aren't a personal, right, like gain or benefit, but about who we work with and what will improve their lives. So that's something, I've really been always thinking, not about myself, but about my team, about other, others, and, serving on the chamber and learning so much more about LGBT issues that I myself, may not relate to, but how important they are for team members.
I think the other thing is for companies to really do some research in what they cover. And sometimes companies will say, we cover transition this or that or whatever, and then they find out that they don't have any doctors or care providers that fall under their plan. And so they kind of get in a bad loophole that says we cover it. However, we don't have a doctor that's on our plan that covers that. So that it makes them look like they don't cover it. And so they need to kind of do a little research and make sure that when they say that they are going to include a particular thing with insurance, that they actually have a provider within their group that will take care of that particular service.
I just want to highlight something Terry said that's really, really strong in terms of thinking about perspectives that are not your own when it's not your issue. So that the notion of, how do you think about the benefits that you provide, or, your structure, or even your workplace culture from someone else's perspective, which takes incredible empathy to be able to do that. And it shouldn't, have to be that once you experience it, then, you become more aware of it. But our human nature is certainly, that is the case, that we do become more aware of things once we've experienced it. And as we move towards a more DEIB friendly space, not just in the workplace, but in the world, that if we could all kind of take that position. My own personal experience is that I was heterosexually married for over a decade. Before that, I'd been single for much of my adult life. There was an incredible difference in life and access moving from just single to married. And I wasn't even aware of that. I didn't know what the benefits and the options of life were that were afforded to people who were married, but it was really, really clear when that happened. Going through divorce, immediately things like premiums skyrocketed, just moving from married to single. Now being same gender loving, there are things that I had not been aware of that are, very much not inclusive, like the default that things are, he and she, as Terry said, and just the lack of inclusion that exists. And so just kind of emphasizing that point of all of us being more empathetic in the way that we think about culture, but the way we think about benefits, and whether or not everyone gets to be included in that.
Really salient point there, Dawn. Thank you. There's some links here that we'll also include in the email that goes out that has some additional resources Terry has pulled for us, specifically around trans inclusive benefits and what that looks like from a corporate standpoint, but then also things that can be brought into a small business as well. I know from a small business perspective, I carried United Healthcare for a long time for my employees, and United Healthcare offered a full trans policy, transgender reassignment or gender confirmation surgery through their insurance program. All I had to do was ask, and I wanted to make sure that it was something that was available to all of my employees without knowing their personal histories or what their lived experience. So we're going to move over now to, we've got a few more minutes, and we'll leave some time here at the end for questions. Excuse me for the UPS delivery man and all the noises that come with that. Wow. So my apologies. Let's talk a little bit about diversity training and its implementation, right? This has been something that I would say that every business has explored to some degree, right? LaTanya, let's talk about it from an SBA perspective, and then we'll kind of shift through with this entire audience. I think it's really important to hear from everybody on this topic, but where have we seen diversity training start, and then where has it moved into across industry, across business?
Honestly, you're going to see a lot of large corporations starting it because they have the resources for it, number one. A lot of your small business owners may not have the resources for the training, may not have the resources to hire a separate person to do the D&I work. So that's usually where you see it starts. So I'll also answer it this way, where you see it appearing last, sadly, is amongst federal government employees like myself, which is not a good thing, especially when you work for an agency where you have to deal with the public every single day. Boom, because I could go on. But you probably all may remember in the last administration, the president at the time said there was a policy federal government wide where we couldn't even do any type of diversity training at all for federal government employees. Fortunately, that has been lifted. But to answer your question directly without going on a tangent, usually you see it with those large employers who can afford to do it. And then even if they can afford to do it, they have to be motivated, of course. And then I think it's kind of tough sometimes for your really small businesses to implement it on their own if they can't afford the resources for the training of their staff or to bring on, a full-time employee. So that's the best way I probably can answer that question.
I have a screaming and barking little puppy, so I'm going to let all the noises all within the last few minutes. So Terry, can you chime in a little bit, or Marie?
Want me to go first, Terry? You want to? Okay, I'll be quick. And Phil, I have a 1.5-year-old Havapoo at home, so I get it. But to your point, LaTanya, we are talking about formal unconscious bias training as a team. We do have a small team. Well, we're about maybe close to 70 employees, including our regionals that live around the country. But I know that is really important. We actually read Unconscious Bias, the book, in our book club. But I do want to say, for those that may not have the budget to hire right this minute, I think it's important to do, and we will do it. But 2020, let's talk about 2020. And first of all, let me mention this. Yesterday, as you all know, was International Holocaust Memorial Day. And in reading and sharing some of that information with my staff here, we know that Jews were not the only ones murdered during that time period. You know, the LGBTQ community was targeted as well. But back to 2020, as we all know, it was a time when everybody sat still and was able to really notice what was going on that has been going on for centuries. But that's okay. And we had to sit still for a minute.
Billy?
I really wanted to, from the top down in my organization, really be thoughtful, because what you saw was a lot of companies doing statements and all of this, but to me, and from what I heard from other convention and visitors bureaus around the country that actually called me, there was that was all. It was just, you know, whatever quote was popular at the time, but there was no substance behind it. And what we did was we created the Nashville CVC Diversity Council among our team here, because it was an opportunity. I felt like, and including me, you know, just because I'm African American doesn't mean I can't learn. There's a lot I did not know and still don't know. And I felt like this was an opportunity for me to learn and to create a safe space and environment for our staff here to learn. And my thing is, we're all ignorant of something, of many things. The issue comes when, and this is Marie speaking, when the ignorance is willful. What I found was that a lot of our team was very interested and hungry for more. Why is this happening? Why, how did we get here? And so we started a book club. First of all, we did and I'm just recommending this because it's something that costs you hardly anything, or if anything, but really having those open conversations with your team. The YWCA has an amazing racial justice program, and they do these challenges throughout the year that's educational. We started a book club. We started Lunch and Learns, which is something that helps us not only internally, but helps us speak about the history here in Nashville and the different cultures to our clients who are very interested as well when they meet in cities of what's going on in those cities that they meet in. So, I mean, we've had everyone from Jefferson Street Sound. The Nashville Public Library has free, tours of the Civil Rights Room. They have a Votes for Women. I mean, there's all kinds, and I can share with you all offline if you want. I'll drop my email in the chat, but there are ways to engage your teams until you have that opportunity to actually pay someone to come in and do some training.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Marie, I'm like, where do I start? I have so much to say. One thing I want to mention is like what LaTanya said, right? So if there are organizations that don't have the finances, right? I think one thing is then if you're a part of the LGBT chamber, if you're part of the Nashville area chamber, ask them. You want this training, right? So ask that chamber that you're a part of who has finances and can host that, make it a priority. So then your business can all benefit, right? You don't have to worry about the cost, but to me, that is how we all work together and improve. So that's one thing I challenge all these small businesses, if you're like, this is important to us, let's utilize, right? How we really come together. A huge thing I really loved was at Comcast. So, we've been virtual. And so we started a diversity and inclusion, speaker series. This was open to everyone. And I will tell you, it was amazing because every month we had, someone from Eric Thomas, who talked about intersectionality and community, to, Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, who I really, really just have so much respect for, talking about anti-racism, to Karen Catlin, who talked about allyship, to Angela Williams, who talks about people with disabilities. The spectrum is so broad, right? I think we are only scratching the surface when we talk about, diversity and equity. And I think we were talking about, and I think the comment in the chat, right, when Heather talks about how do we go past writing, our pronouns and, we talk about bathrooms. We are all so much more than that. And so that's one thing I would say at our company, we, made statements, but of course we are doing that. And so our department, at my team was given some funds, and we were like, this is important to us. So we are making sure that we are continuing this conversation. It should not just be once a year, once a quarter, but it's something that we should really strive to live out each day. And so for us, we have a 4-part series that we are doing this year, and we have been working with Culture Shift team, and they have offices here, but we are going to do courageous conversations, right? So how do we engage respectfully? Because like we all said, we don't know everything, and sometimes it has to be us, right? Taking that first step to see that it's possible. And next, we're going to do one on inclusion ambassadors. So I'm part of the employee resource groups. I co-lead one of them. And so for us, it was like, how do we give leaders that next level of education and where they feel that they can, represent, that they feel confident, right? Because we're all learning. And so that's focused on how to be better allies for each other. And one thing I was really, really very serious about was having conscious conflict, right? So when we get it wrong, how do we address that and maintain community? Because it's okay. I think we all need to realize it's going to happen, and that's all right. And the last thing is, in our 4-part series is reflective dialogue. So then it's kind of looking at where have we been, and where do we go from here? And each one of us here are on different parts of the journey, and that's okay, right? And I think that's why we need each other, because I may be strong in one area of allyship, but I really need to understand more, in terms of other areas, and Phil will have a strength that I don't have. And so those are a couple of, suggestions I have. And like Marie said with her book club, I think it's like, just how do you create ways where people can engage in different ways? We are all different types of learners. So some people don't want to read a book and that's okay. I love books, but I know that's not everyone's thing. So how do we have articles, or how do we have, newsletters so people can engage in different ways? And one thing I was really proud of, we have a Be Inclusive newsletter, and we started a column that was called, Dear Out at Comcast. And it was a safe place for anyone to ask questions about LGBT topics, where it was anonymous, right? But then it provided the team and the ERGs with issues that we know actually people at our company care about, and we can present it in a way where people aren't being called out, and it's like, oh, that person doesn't know, how can they not know? And it's such a really, to me, great way in bringing us all in together and learning together. So those are just some examples I have.
If I could just jump in here real quick, Phil, I know we're about right at the hour mark, but I just want to say 2 things. That one, I think that there's a lot that can be done about equity, diversity, inclusion, belonging training, but there's another thing to look around. And if you have the best policies and you do the best training and you do everything, but your top 8 people are just straight white men, then the people that are striving don't have the representation. So we've got to lead by example, and we've got to have representation in all levels and all areas of so that people know that they've got an opportunity to grow, to say that they are accepted and they belong, but there's nobody like them on a picture on the wall or in a level. It doesn't convey what you're saying.
And can I just add, Phil, I didn't say this expressly, so I might as well just go ahead and say it. At the end of the day, every single one of us on this webinar and outside this webinar, our family and friends, have to interact at some point with a federal government civil servant worker like me, right? The U.S. Social Security Administration, the Department of Veteran Affairs. And I would encourage the public to ask those questions when they go and have a meeting, have an appointment, have any type of business with the federal government agency. Do you guys have any type of training on diversity and inclusion and equity? And ask it and push it. Because if they don't have it and they're dealing with the public on a day-to-day basis, they should. So ask the question, push it, and then don't forget that, we all have representation in Congress. And those questions can go to our congressional reps as well. So what's happening to get federal government employees trained, particularly those that deal with the public on a day-to-day basis? We have to be educated.
Thank you, LaTanya. I agree 100%. really nice way to tie that together. I just want to call attention to Dawn Stone from CNM, who is putting some really great resources into the chat. But one that I want to specifically call out is the Collective Impact Certificate through CNM. I did the program last year. It was incredible. I learned so much, was connected to really wonderful individuals. And I would say it was probably one of the highlights of my 2021. And so I would strongly encourage it if you haven't done it. It is a really fantastic program. So just calling that out specifically. For those of you that are watching this in post, we will obviously include some links for that as well for registration. So we are coming up, we're a little bit past the hour mark here, and I do want to be mindful of the time that each of our panelists are offering up. But I want to talk about really two more things. I really want to get into this conversation around what businesses can do to support nonprofits and vice versa, because that's the most important piece of this conversation, right? We're talking about businesses and the intersection of business and nonprofit. I mean, this is hosted by Center for Nonprofit Management. We have nonprofit leaders who are on this call, and we want to be able to provide them with resources. So what are some of the things even from a small business perspective? And I think LaTanya and Matt, and Dawn, you can specifically talk about this. How can small businesses support nonprofits? And then Terry and Marie, and you can talk a little bit about the larger side of businesses and how they're supporting nonprofits and vice versa. Because I think when we are opening up these spaces of conversation around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, it can create beautiful synergies and then also change, right? And so let's start with the small business, because I do believe that small businesses are kind of the heart of our communities. What are small businesses, what can small businesses do to support nonprofits? Matt, I think here also is really important to mention the work with EO and the hundreds of businesses that are a part of the EO program, and some great examples that you've seen with your work with EO.
Yeah, so, I think we've always been pretty fortunate that we've been able to partner with some nonprofits that we're able to, partner with them in promoting their mission and their values. Being able to, and that is another great way to show that. I've always viewed that as another great way to show my employees that I support them. It was always very important for me, because we have hundreds of opportunities a year to support different charities. And one of the things that I've always tried to do is whatever my employees were involved in, I wanted to be involved in that too. So it was two great things. One is being able to show my employees that I support them, and then also being able to support these charities and nonprofits that exist in our community. And I think, with our EO community, we're very much involved in a lot of different nonprofits and charitable organizations. And I think, we always talk about there's two things that we can give. We can give our time and we can give our money. And I think both of those things are very, very important for us to figure out what lane it is that we're going to give in. And, I must say from a personal point of view, just being here today was like, wow, I didn't realize so many people like talking about this. And I know I'm in a different space right now, but it's just sometimes, and I can only imagine how alone folks feel. And that's a lot of things we talk about that in the entrepreneurial community, is how alone business owners feel. But I think, I guess that part of it just comes down to, knowing that these resources exist and knowing that my support is actually wanted. And that just makes me feel like, wow, I can do so much more.
Happy to jump in, Phil. But before becoming an entrepreneur again, I think you might have mentioned that I was at the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce, their VP of Marketing, leading that work. And during the 2.5 years there, really learned the value of public and private partnerships, and that we have to work together to achieve many of these kinds of big issues that we're all passionate about, or we just realize the greater value, excuse me, for our community and for other individuals. I think one piece of that is allowing time for your staff to be able to participate in these kinds of initiatives or to work with nonprofits or to support some of that greater work. The other piece is among many different boards, many of them are nonprofit boards, but over the last few years, I've realized how much of a deficit there is and how much need there is for business leaders to offer their time and their support to these boards. And that is a great way where you can bring your insight, your expertise, but also just create more alignment between the public and private, and be able to help advance some of the issues. And then to an earlier point, it just puts many different perspectives at the table, which are really important. At least that's kind of the beginning place for us to be at the table and to be able to consider those perspectives to really create some real change.
I'll jump in here as well to say that, from our lens, we are looking at it from a, what does the customer need? How can we partner with local community organizations? I will tell you that the majority, especially the larger conventions that come to town, not just to Nashville, any city that they meet in, they want to leave that city better than they found it. And that's more than spending the millions of dollars that they do when they come to town, because that helps to employ people but actually working on the ground. So you may see a convention with attendees that are, helping out at Second Harvest, or they may be painting a school, or they may be building bikes at the convention center to donate to a local charity. We serve as, we are a connector with a lot of, they'll come to our office and say, who do we need to reach out to? And of course, we don't pick and choose, but we send them, we try to dig and see what they're really looking for, but we will send them to, Hands on Nashville or CNM, or, connect them with people that we know in the community. And we have really, I have to say, we have great relationships and have had great relationships with a lot of the organizations in the community. Another thing is workforce development. The Urban League of Middle Tennessee, we partner and reach out to a lot of these organizations because hospitality is huge here in Nashville, right? It's a huge economic driver here, but we could never have enough people working. So we try to make sure that when these job fairs are going on and things like that, that we are engaged within the community, and make sure these organizations know about these job fairs so that they can share it with their audience.
I think too, small businesses, of course, are suffering the most from the Great Resignation, right? Trying to keep employees. And we're starting an effort, we started it 2 years ago, and we're going to expand it this year. We kind of been doing PPP for a while, but small businesses aren't often aware that there are many local profits here in Nashville and around the state that are training up employees, period. Indeed is not your only source to find employees for your business. There are nonprofits that have grants and support from the Tennessee Department of Labor to train SNAP beneficiaries and get them placed into employment. There are nonprofits that are training up individuals who are trying to re-enter society, who are looking for employment. So, my staff and I, we already worked with several small businesses that got together and actually formed a nonprofit to train employees to feed them into the construction industry because these businesses were suffering and they couldn't keep employees, and they were trying to perform on some government contracts. So it was a great synergy. So one of the things me and my staff want to ramp up this year is further connecting small businesses to those nonprofits that are training people for jobs, but they don't necessarily know how to get them connected to some of the small businesses that need them. So I think that's a great opportunity for small businesses in the nonprofit community to connect.
Yeah, and one thing I really want to mention, of course, that I feel like sometimes it's just like people not knowing, right? So at Comcast, we really support several nonprofits. We have national partnerships, and always working with, trying to get people connected. And for us, it's in our vertical. So digital literacy skills, right? So we work with several nonprofits so that we can support the classes so that they, those organizations, they know the needs of their community, but they don't have to worry about funding it. We are able to do that so they can do their work. One thing I really do want to mention for sure is Comcast Rise. So we started this during COVID because we are committed to supporting, small businesses who've been hit by, the pandemic. And I'm really, really excited because we've been able to give over $16 million in grants. And when I say that, right, that's like the whole country, but there was a winner in my neighborhood. Tremaine Crook with Punches and Bunches received an award. And we've been able to work together, and he's done a lot of health classes because, we could all probably stand to work out a little bit more sitting in our sitting in our chairs during this COVID world, but it's been so amazing. And so for me, I want to make sure that all small businesses, so LaTanya, I'm going to send you this link. I'm going to put it in there because I want people to apply. There are resources out there where you can get a technology makeover, that you can get, like media help, things like that you have access to. And we really want that to happen. So that's why we need conversations like this. So thanks, Phil, because, I was listening all the things that we do, and I'm like, this is a program that I want to make sure that everyone in Middle Tennessee, right, all of our small businesses are applying, and we already have winners. So they know legitimately it's real and they can connect with other business winners.
Olivia, maybe you could talk a little bit about the chamber and how the chamber can play, like the LGBT chamber specifically, can play a role in supporting some of these businesses from a different perspective. From a chamber perspective, there's a really unique way that the LGBT chamber can work with some of these businesses in our community as well, with some of these, helping them with some of these resources. And Terry, you can chime in as well.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I would definitely support that businesses can become LGBTQIA certified. And that's something that the chamber has the ability to do, and that's going to set your business apart. And so that's one thing, I'll send a link to get signed up for that, but definitely feel like that's something the chamber is doing that others, like do not provide.
Also, we've got job listings too of jobs that are available. So that if you're looking for a position at a job that is LGBT certified, then you can find that there as well.
I would say that my my business is LGBTQIA certified, and it was an exhaustive process at the beginning, but it's also been a really valuable element to the next, the ability to interface with some large companies and offer my services and programs and offerings to larger companies as well. So it was a really great opportunity on that front. And that's just one example of ways that a nonprofit can engage the business community, right? There are other opportunities as well. We have a number of LGBT organizations here in this city. We have a very large list of nonprofits in this city, all of whom, many of whom I would say, have some element of diversity, excuse me, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as part of their work. And just reaching out to them and engaging with them about having conversation about how we can create a more respect-driven economy in many ways is kind of a critical element. So with that said, does anyone have any parting thoughts that they would like to add? We are well over time, and I want to thank you all very much for being with us. I'll kind of open the floor if there's any last minute questions or thoughts.
I'd just like to jump in there and say thank you, Matt, for the person that you are. As somebody from the trans community, you're a rare commodity, and I just commend you. You're an amazing human.
Well, thank you very much. Honored to be here. So honored that you invited me here, Phil. I literally had no idea that this exists. And, you know, even in the opportunities with my trans son and finding, you know, resources to support him, I had no idea. I'm actually constructing an email right now to you, Abby, about how I can learn more about what you do and how I can help and participate. I'm just thrilled to have been here today. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. I echo that. Thank you, Phil, for and CNM for reaching out to the CBC. It's so appreciated. We've done a lot, but we have a lot more to do, and I'm just excited to be in this esteemed group of folks. So thanks a lot.
All right.
Well, Phil, if I can say something for a second,
Sure,
I am
absolutely.
so thankful. I am so happy. Phil, I want to thank you. You're looking fabulous. Phil and I'm like, he helps me with my fashion game, and I'm looking a little crushed today. But my son goes to therapy on Friday. So good to see all of you. Great to see you, Olivia. I have been waiting to see you, baby, so much. So we at CNM are so excited to have all of you. Good to see you again, Latanya. This is great, right? And Terry, I've heard so much about you. Happy to have you, Matt, Marie, excuse me, Dawn, of course, Talia, Terry, Danny, Marissa, Heather. I thank you all. We are wanting to open more spaces like this. We at CNM, part of my vision when I started this job in, what was it, April 15th, Terry, 2021, I said, I want to be put out of my job. And so my goal is to have our spaces so amped with information and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness, because the belongingness thing is what people miss. You know, you can recruit me, but how are you going to keep me? Why do I want to stay in your space, Terry, right? So I'm so glad we now have a new letter to add and to further our conversations. But all of these conversations are open, and we want to encourage you to tell others about it. So we have a blackout conversation it's actually a one-day immersion in all things Black. So we have everyone from senators coming to people leading mega churches here in the Nashville area, talking about the issues around the Black community. We had one for natives in October of last year, Native and Indigenous people. We have one for Asia and Pacific Islanders coming up in May. We have what we call All Nations in July. So that's what you were saying earlier, people who are not from here. You know, a lot of times we don't know where people are from, so we have to ask the question. One of you talked about that. We want to start asking more questions and really pushing, like Latanya said, pushing people to be inclusive. You know, my queer daughter has a very hard time with all of her identities, being gender fluid, having a sister who did go through the transition. And so, you know, we need these spaces to talk, but I really want to open it up for you and others. Here's Xavier. He always makes an entrance. There he is. Yes, Xavier. Everybody, okay, baby, okay. So I just want to say thank you to all of you, and please, we will continue to have more of these. Phil is going to be leading several conversations, but we even have a Jewish affinity group. We have, and I'm starting a white woman affinity group and a white male affinity group. So I'm working on my leaders for that too. So I want you all to stay plugged in, because we are moving mountains and we're going to deconstruct white supremacy before I die. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you all so much for participating, panelists. You really very interesting conversation, and nice. I know many of you, and nice to meet some new friends. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you. Thanks, Terry. So I will just quickly note that our next conversation our next in-conversation, I should say, with the Center for Nonprofit Management will be on March 31st, where we will be discussing LGBTQ health and Transgender Day of Visibility. That is March 31st from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. I look forward to that conversation. It will be a robust conversation with many trans leaders in our community, and I'm really looking forward to engaging in that. So please don't have a nice day. Have a day that matters. Have a day that is true. Have a day that is direct. And have a day that is honest. Be well, everybody.
Thanks, Phil.